Diamond Reynolds, second from left, Philando Castile's girlfriend, at a rally in St. Paul in July 2016. Angela Jimenez for the New York Times. Diamond Reynolds, who lived the bloody aftermath of last year's police shooting of her boyfriend, Philando Castile, would receive $800,000 in a settlement announced on Tuesday by officials in St. Anthony, Minn. The settlement, which still must be approved by a judge, seemed likely to be the final legal development in a case that led to huge protests and a closely-led manslaughter trial. Jerry Faust, the mayor of St. Anthony, said in a statement that the agreement opens the door to continued healing within our community. The settlement includes $675,000 from St. Anthony as well as $125,000 from the nearby city of Roseville and an insurance fund. Ms. Reynolds, who claimed emotional distress and false arrest, said the settlement confirmed that what she experienced that night was wrong. Mr. Castile was killed by a St. Anthony officer, and Ms. Reynolds was held for questioning afterward by Roseville officers. A protest in St. Paul last year against the fatal police shooting of Mr. Castile. Joshua Lott for the New York Times. While no amount of money can change what happened, bring Philando back, or erase the pain that my daughter and I continue to suffer, I do hope that closing this chapter will allow us to get our lives back and move forward, Ms. Reynolds said in a statement. Mr. Castile was pulled over on July 6, 2016, near the state fairgrounds by Officer Geronimo Yanez of the St. Anthony Police, who said that Mr. Castile's Oldsmobile had a broken brake light and that he matched the description of a robbery suspect. Ms. Reynolds was riding in the front passenger seat. The exchange between Mr. Castile and Officer Yanez started off routine, but turned tense after Mr. Castile said he was carrying a gun. Dash camera video showed Officer Jimenez shouting at Mr. Castile not to reach for the weapon. The officer then unholstered his gun and fired several shots into the car, fatally striking Mr. Castile. The episode quickly gained national attention because Ms. Reynolds, Mr. Castile's girlfriend, began seeing the shooting's aftermath live on Facebook and challenging Officer Yanez's version of events. Ms. Reynolds said her boyfriend had meant no harm and was trying to comply with the officer's orders. Ms. Reynolds' video showed Mr. Castile bleeding through his t-shirt as Officer Yanez cursed and continued pointing his gun through the window. Ms. Reynolds' 4-year-old daughter was in the back seat at the time of the shooting. Protesters assembled for days after Mr. Castile's death, camping outside the governor's mansion in nearby St. Paul and sometimes clashing with the police. Officer Jimenez was later charged with second-degree manslaughter, but he was acquitted at a trial in June. He told jurors that he had feared for his life and that Mr. Castile had reached for a gun. "I was scared to death," he said during the trial. "I thought I was going to die." Ms. Reynolds testified for the prosecution. "I felt broken, hurt, confused, lost," she told the jurors. This summer, St. Anthony agreed to pay a separate, nearly $3 million settlement to Mr. Castile's estate. The city also reached a separation agreement with Officer Jimenez and said he would not return to work there. St. Anthony officials said some of the money being paid to Ms. Reynolds would be placed in a trust for her daughter's education.